What's up, guys?
Dude, it was running so weird on my side. I was like, what is happening here?
Oh, it's funny.
It was like delayed. Here, let me try this one more time. Here, hold on.
Oh,
That's
live
better.
TV, folks. Live TV, folks. This is how it's done. This is how it's done.
Hey,
This is
we
how
keep
the
things
sausage is
casual around
made,
here.
boys and girls. This is how the sausage is made. You know what I mean?
Oh, sausage is made here, man. What? Why is Andrew not got a weird shirt on, by the way? So Richie Rich could
I know. Oh, you know what? I should have done that. I should have done
Yeah,
that. You could have clowned on me, dude.
You know, he really just did that on purpose.
I agree.
Yeah.
He wanted to go basic for this.
I want to
Yeah.
go basic. You're basic. You're basic.
Oh, man.
my God.
Well, let's introduce our guest here today. So obviously we're here to talk about the Broncos-Chargers game, Week 18, season finale. Big game in a sense, but we're here to talk about the Broncos, kind of talk about this game all around. But let's introduce our guest here, Rich A. Tell us about you. We've had you on the show before.
Yep.
Plug everything in for you.
So I'm Richie Rich A. I am with the MHRT network. I am the kind of the main host of the Wild Wild West podcast on that network, which our network put together for an AFC West roundtable. We have a member of each and every team. It's fantastic. Some of you know me, some of you don't. For those who don't, jump on over and check us out. You can go over to MHRT Network, whether it be Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. You can catch us there and like and subscribe. And for those of you who want to follow us through your Chargers compadre, that is Coach Defense of the Lockdown Defense podcast. You can find him on YouTube, and you'll also see me frequenting his channel as well. I always like throwing in digs when and where I can.
Yep. And he will be on our post-game show as well when we beat the Broncos. So, very excited.
on to the show.
Wonderful chatting with you guys. You guys have a wonderful evening.
It's a very short show.
Go. Yeah.
Hey, but in case you didn't recognize the accent, guys, Rich is from Canada. So, yeah, he's in Northern America's hat. Very exciting. but he's a big Broncos fan. So we want to talk about the game. So, Rich, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Broncos got to do? What are we going to see this game at all? Right? I mean, I'm curious. Is Russ even going to play? Like, what's the situation with all this?
Yeah, I think Russ will play because I think he has to prove stuff. He has to prove that he's, something really at this point.
Yeah.
I actually think Avatar. Nice to see you. Nice to have a Broncos fan over here.
Yeah.
Get out of here. No, I'm joking.
Look, I need help. I need help somewhere from the crowd. But no, I actually think this is an interesting game. I think you're going to see the Broncos front office intentionally pull some guys back. So I'm looking at the current injury report. I think you're seeing guys like DJ Jones. You don't need to know he's good. Sit him down.
Yep.
Like, you already know he's good. He is the best defensive player on that line. You sit him down and you rest him out, which is exactly what they're doing. The other interesting one here is obviously Calvin Anderson, our left tackle, who's actually been quite good as a fill-in for Garrett Bowles. I've always felt he was a starting caliber left tackle at the NFL level. Maybe a lower tier, but still I've always felt he's a starting caliber left tackle. He is going to be out this game, which will basically, in my opinion, leave the left side rather vulnerable for the Broncos, which probably doesn't bode well for Russell Wilson if he does play. So, we'll call it built-in excuses. And then we have Kendall Hinton, who's been a rather solid wide receiver for us, kind of in that fill-in kind of, Swiss Army knife kind of guy on the field. He's out for this game as well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just the litany of injuries that we are dealing with on our team. I mean, the Chargers have been bad, but then you guys started getting some guys back. The Broncos started off worse than you and have only gotten worse from there.
Yeah, and that's just frustrating. We were actually just discussing this on our I think it was our post-game show from last game, and we're not seeing any injuries on our injury reports at all after every game. We're like, what is going on? I mean, what are they feeding these guys all of a sudden? It's awesome. So it's great. And it's good that we're getting healthy now because that's the time it matters. And make no mistake about it, football is a game of attrition, right? And that's a big reason why it's really difficult to succeed over and over again when you have these situations like this. So anyways, just some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's insane looking at your list right now. And I mean, I think you guys are one of the second highest teams in the league for players on the IR. Is that correct? Because I think the Titans are one at like 32 players or something stupid like that. But I want to say
total players.
Yeah, total players that have been on the IR. Yeah.
Okay, because the Titans may have us beat in total players, but I'm quite certain we like no one comes close to the number of starters that we have that are on IR. I don't even think it's close.
Yeah, absolutely.
So frustrating.
I mean, when I looked at that list that just came out, I'm like, my goodness, like that is, I'm stunned to see that kind of list. Like, how can you perform when you got so many guys banged up like this? Now, once again, we're in week 18. Hey, injuries are 100% possible or probable in the NFL. You're going to get injured, but that is a massive list. And the thing about it is with you guys, like you guys have really done a great job on defense. It's just the offense can't figure itself out. Now, last week, Russell started cooking. He didn't just go out for takeout. He
started cooking.
Russ started cooking instead of getting that takeout, And so
he had the walk out.
Got 3 touchdowns.
He's making it happen.
3 touchdowns, 1 pick. I mean, he started kind of doing his thing. Like, is it going back to that? Like, you guys lose your coach, he's gone. Now it seems like Russell Wilson is playing a little bit more like Russell Wilson. I mean, I want to hear your
I had a different opinion, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. But my original thought, and maybe I was right, and now there's been kind of that back office meeting where Russ was basically told off, and maybe that happened too. Yeah. But my original gut reaction that I took away from all of this was, and all of the kind of information that was coming out at the time, was that Russ was trying to convert himself to being more of a pocket passer.
Yep.
in my understanding, and from all the information that came out in the offseason, was he met with Peyton Manning multiple times in the offseason and met in the office that he has in Dove Valley there, and was trying to find a way in converting himself to becoming more of a pocket passer. I then was under the impression that was because Russ had all this huge clout coming in when he came into Denver, that he then started to forcibly shape some of the playbook that Hackett was installing at the onset, the beginning part of the year, to almost force him to become that pocket passer.
Yep.
Now, obviously that failed miserably. That did not work, and it was just absolute garbage on the field. And then now that Hackett's gone, we're now starting to see Russ do a little bit more of what he was known to do, which was try to make the first one or two plays that are available, but then immediately pivot to off script, ad lib, which frankly is why he's done so well at the NFL level to date. The one thing that has surprised me a little bit still is he still has some accuracy issues.
Yeah.
And I think that either Russ needs to fire his QB coach that he has. He has a private QB coach that needs to just, be shown the door. And I think that Russ needs to, if he's going to fail, he should be failing with the team's resources, not bringing in his own and having them not do well, because I just don't think it looks good on him.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to see that watch or how it unfolded for him. But I've heard the same thing from some of the other Broncos fans that are my buddies too, that they're just trying to kind of, in a sense, fit a square peg in a round hole kind of thing. Force him to do something that won't fit, that doesn't fit who Russell Wilson is. And I don't understand why a coach wants to do something like that. Like,
he didn't have a choice, in my opinion.
What? Say that again?
In my opinion, he didn't have a choice.
He just had to do it, I guess. I mean, that's crazy.
In my opinion, he did not have a choice.
Wow.
In my like from where I'm sitting, from what I was generally able to tell, it certainly appeared on the surface that when Russ was made, the commitments were made to Russ on the onset, I think, before the no trade clause was removed and all that other kind of stuff. And so I think as a result of that, Nathaniel Hackett was somewhat handcuffed in what he can do. And I think it's an unfortunate perfect storm, because I think that if Hackett wanted to do what he did exclusively in Green Bay, we would have been running a wide zone scheme, which is very similar to what they run in Seattle. And if Russ was then told to, sit down and kind of play his brand of football, I actually think the Broncos could have looked much different this season. And so my opinion is, I think this is a little bit of column A and column B, but I think that with the contract of Russell being column A, column B had to go. And then column A basically got a stern talking to say, stop the nonsense.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing, because I mean, you kind of like, okay, when I go back to just thinking the Broncos season, the first thing, the writing was kind of, I would say, on the wall for Hackett when he went for that 61-yard field goal to try to go for the win.
Yeah.
And to me, like, wow, like you guys got a great kicker by all means. Great kicker. 61 yards, probably in Mile High. Could work. Could definitely work. But that was kind of an interesting move at that point. So there is that level that I keep saying that, like, was Hackett the problem or was Russell Wilson the problem? Now, after one game having basically Nathaniel Hackett gone, you have what's his face, Jerry Rosburg as your head coach.
Yeah,
kind of seemed like a different team at that point. It really put Chiefs on their heels, to be honest.
It did.
I mean,
the other thing was we had Outen calling plays instead of Clinton Kubiak.
Yep.
That is. Well, I mean, Kubiak's basically a household name in Denver, right? I mean, it's just it is that is what it is.
Yep.
And but at the end of the day, we had Outen calling plays, and what was really interesting. So you saw a different team on the field and some benefits and stuff there.
Yeah.
The running joke in Denver was that Outen was there, and they couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
Because every time it came due where like Hackett lost the play calling duties, they threw it over to Clint Kubiak.
Yep.
They completely went over the offensive coordinator and they went to Outen. So there's been these long-standing jokes amongst the Broncos fans to say, either someone has some glossy photos of some really key people in Denver organization, and that's why he's still there, or someone is making some really bad choices. And it's looking like Rosberg is actually executing things very effectively and efficiently as an interim head coach, which is, frankly, it looks like it's the right move so far, but who knows if it were to play out over a much longer stretch of more than just 2 games,
right.
Maybe it doesn't look as good long-term.
Right.
Well, maybe we should talk about this real quick. I know Avatar's thought here. Funny thing, if the Bengals win on Sunday, Chargers are locked to the 5th seed. So I would say this, because that game is before the Charger game, correct?
Yep.
So if that happens, I think it would completely change the way this game even would look, right? You got to wonder, if any starters for the Chargers are going to be out there. And that's partially why we want to discuss this as well, too, is have a conversation around who's actually going to play. Because right now it's a bit of a toss-up, right? I mean, I would say this. If the Bengals win, then they'll probably sit Herbert, I would think. They probably sit Eckler. They probably sit a lot of their starters for the most part. They probably put in a lot of scrubs. I mean, they're not talking about that, but you never know, right? I don't really know that they're really going to focus on it because we'd have the 5th seed locked. So, I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, my whole thing about it is even to say if we had the 5th seed locked, I kind of want my team to be able to want to keep momentum going. You know, you could find things that you want to correct. I mean, to be honest, last week was our first game that we really had a really good offensive outpouring.
Running the ball well, nicely.
Running,
great.
Passing.
You guys think about cohesion, sure.
Yeah, there's a really, really good, kind of finalizing of the offense and defense per se. And I want to have that same momentum coming into the playoffs. And I think that's something that I want to be able to see. So personally, in my opinion, I think that we should still try to be able to get in at least a quarter or 2 quarters into this game and then just put in all of our scrubs after that point. And this is the first time that we scored over 30 points since I think week 5 or something, or week 6.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of nice to be able to see something like that happen. And to be honest, our tight ends are 2 guys that really found ways in our red zone, which is a big, big issue for us, has been scoring in the red zone. And both of them came in and scored touchdowns for us with Everett and Parham. So bottom line, I want the momentum going. This game is very much about momentum. And if you don't have momentum, you're just going to falter as a team. And so I want to be able to see that we keep that momentum going into it. I don't want to go cold into whoever we might play. So I think that's a good thing to go into. So,
yeah. And we also want to talk about player safety as well, too. There's some conversations around the two. And by the way, James, answer this question, too, for Tony here.
Yep.
Is there a path for Tony, our boy Tony, right?
Yep. Yeah. Tony, what up, buddy?
Tony. Yeah.
And I threw in the chat there and I said, basically just to read the question, is there a path for the Chargers to host the AFCC game, or will it be a neutral site? So I think the neutral site stuff only matters to the Chiefs, Bengals, and the Bills. I don't think it matters based upon what I'm reading as. It only matters to those 3 teams. So I think, correct me if I'm right on that, Rich, but I'm pretty sure that's the case from what I'm reading.
Sounds accurate to me. Yep.
Odd situation going on with that regardless. And we could totally segue talking a little bit about player safety if you guys want to go on it. I feel like we're kind of going all over the board on subjects here, but basically the thing about it is we need to have the 1 to the 4 lose in the next 2 rounds. Obviously, we need to get up to the AFC Championship level of, say, Bills, Chiefs, Bengals, and Jaguars, Titans, or whomever it might be. If they lose and we continue winning, we could host the AFC Championship game in SoFi. So,
correct.
That's what's required. And we will not have a neutral site by any means on that. So,
no.
Yeah, no. I mean, ultimately, I think that's unlikely given the caliber of teams you're discussing there, just generally speaking. But I think you're right. To tie back to your previous comment there, I don't think that's in your best interest to pull and rest all your starters.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you were to, now that doesn't mean your head coach isn't going to do it, but because the temptation is always there from a logical and practical standpoint, from a player safety perspective, but then also just from a practical perspective by saying, I have this guy and right now he's healthy. So if I pull him, he's still going to be healthy going into the game after this, which matters obviously far more than a game that at that point, given that scenario, wouldn't. But the odds and the kind of data, if you will, does not back that decision at all.
Yep.
In fact, it's the complete opposite. If you rest your starters and you don't have them play at least half a game, the stats in the following game come playoffs for your team, you effectively get blown out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you don't want that. I trust me, I get the temptation as Chargers fans to say, we've had injuries all year. We're finally healthy. No.
Yeah.
But you need to keep the hits. You need to keep your body adjusted to the rigor of a football game. And if you don't do it, your body kind of starts to lose it a little bit. And you end up with that steep decline that happens at the end of with that gap that you're forcibly inserting unneededly.
A good example would be Joey Bosa coming back this last game, and he apparently had food poisoning, is what he just talked about today. I guess his girlfriend cooked some fish for him. Didn't work out too well, didn't agree with him, and he had food poisoning. So whether that happened or not, right? I mean, and Carlos specifically talked about, give Bosa limited snaps, but it is, here you go. This is it. So we got a couple of things we're going to show you guys as well, too. Some interesting little news and tidbits. But I mean, came down with food poisoning, right? It was a big issue. But again, I think giving him some snaps would be a good thing, right? Get him out there, get the wiggles out a little bit. I think that all makes a big difference for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to your point on that, Rich, I mean, I know we're not trying to basically say and talk about the Chargers purely on this. Obviously, we want to talk to you about the Broncos and everything too. But the one thing too, I agree in the sense of keep the players on the field and keep playing them, because personally, and one thing, I want to win, and we play to win the game. Remember,
to win the game.
Bottom line, Herm Edwards. We need to unlock that Herm Edwards side of things. So we play to win the game, kind of thing. So the thing is, though, I want to be able to see this Chargers team find a way to be able to have a 11-6 winning record to end the season. And once again, now we have a 4-game win streak going into this game. I would like to be able to go 5 and just keep winning from that point. When you breed a confidence in a team and you have a confidence and you're rolling really well, keep that confidence going. Keep that momentum going. Keep it going. And I want to be able to see this team, after all that we've gone through this season, if we could end with 11-6, that is a massive, massive win for this team, confidence-wise. Massive win for our head coach, in my opinion. Some just momentum. You need it. So I'm all for that too. It would just be Chargers luck to where somebody gets injured, and that's the whole thing. That's where our jaded fan base is all about, where we're like, yep, that's exactly what happened. So we just don't want that to happen. That's the whole thing that we get scared about.
For sure.
So. But I would say go back to the Broncos. So going back to your head coaching situation and how you guys obviously got rid of Hackett. The one thing I'm going to say here, I heard about Evero. Gosh, I can never say the dude's name. Is it Iju or Evero? I think is how you pronounce it.
It's Ejiro Evero.
Whew, man,
Good
I have a hard time with that name. But he was supposed to be the interim head coach. Yeah. And then he was like, nah, I don't want none of this. I don't want anything part of this. So interesting situation. Does he not want to be a head coach?
Though, right?
Say that again.
You know why, though, right?
I'm assuming that he feels like it's a hot mess and he doesn't want to be a part of it.
No.
Oh,
no.
What happened?
So it's my understanding from multiple folks that are in kind of the contract world and the NFL world that when you elevate yourself to the head coach spot, you, from my understanding, is you null and void your previous contract with the team.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And that's my understanding. Now, I've heard some conflicting reports from some of the non-football folks that I'm connected with, but of the actual football guys, like all of the guys that are actually in the football industry for a living, they have all been pretty consistent in the fact that Evero would kind of be pushing aside his contract. Now, what that means for him is the Broncos and he would have to have a standing agreement of sorts that if he doesn't get the head coaching position, because they do want to interview him for it.
Yeah.
And that he would then be retained back as a DC. But the other thing that would do for him is that if he interviews for another team for a head coaching position and then kind of lingers around and the Broncos end up bringing in a guy earlier than that, he can end up finding himself without a job. So this actually kind of forces the Broncos to fire him if they don't want them as the DC, and then he would get severance as a result.
Got it.
And so in my opinion, from a labor law perspective, which I work in the legal field up here in Canada, and I have a lot of contacts in the States that are in the legal field. So I actually know a little bit about the labor laws and whatnot. So he would actually qualify to get the payout of his DC contract if they were to outright fire him and decide to move on. I suspect that they're not going to want to move on from him because he's proven that he's been a pretty strong leader. Although I will say the last few weeks have not helped his case a lot, because the defense, despite having a modest amount of the starters on it still, has not played up to the level that they had at the beginning of the season, which is not necessarily a good reflection on him as a motivator and leader of men.
Well, I would say this though too, like Vic Fangio, when he left, I thought your defense was going to really take a huge dip, because I thought he was a very good defensive coordinator.
What did I say though? What did I tell you guys? I said it's not. I said I know Evero. He's going to kill it because he comes from the Fangio tree. And then he also brings in two other sides from two other very, very Dom Capers, I believe, is the other one. He comes from a coaching tree of. And then he also comes from Wade Phillips.
Okay.
Stud.
So, I mean, his resume within the defensive side of the ball is like stupid good.
Well, and Brandon Staley came from Vic Fangio as well. Vic Fangio was the main guy that got him in the NFL, right? So we wouldn't even have him as our head coach if it wasn't for Vic Fangio. So that's partially why I wanted to bring him up as well too. So that's awesome. I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was part of that tree. That's pretty cool. That's good to know. So okay, here's the real question then. I would say this. I'm going to think for some of our fan base here right now. Oh gosh, what's that guy's name all of a sudden? Dude from the Saints. Oh my gosh, what am I? Sean Payton. Yep. Do you think Sean Payton's got a shot at going to Denver, or do you think it's going to be someone in-house? What are your thoughts on that?
Those are my only options.
Well, I mean, because I know Sean Payton. I heard
hot name. It's the hot name.
I don't like this game, man. If those are my only, I really don't like. First off, I think the Broncos need too much. Well, here, let me preface this.
Sure.
We have a handful of people that are injured right now, and a couple people that are not injured. That, in my opinion, the Broncos should trade in order to reinfuse draft capital into our team, because we need players at key positions.
Yeah.
So that's my first. That's my first comment here. And in order for Russ and our offense to kind of bounce back and do some great things, I think we need to kind of strategically sell off pieces and even household names that people are familiar with, because they can bring back a ton of capital. And I think that you do not have a steep drop off when you either go to the next man up, or if you were to draft someone in the early to mid rounds based on some of the capital that you might get back for some of those players. If we move in that direction and are able to gain an extra first rounder, because we have one from the 49ers through the Bradley Chubb trade.
Oh, that's right.
Then maybe Peyton might come here. The problem is that right now, all reports are saying that the minimum the Saints are looking for right now is a first rounder. So unless we end up with multiple first rounders this year, the short answer to that is no.
Yeah, it's interesting, guys, because I know a lot of, when we were frustrated with Brandon Staley for quite a while, I know Aether was not, but a lot of people were like, oh, Sean Payton to the Chargers. Yeah, first rounder, $10 million a year. You know how much we're paying Brandon Staley right now? $1 million a year. His $4 million contract for 4 years. He's getting peanuts at this point, right? So,
dude, that's a steal.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
Like that's literally robbery right there.
It's crazy. It's crazy, right? So it's going to be very curious. I'm very curious to see how this plays out this next season, after the season, as far as we go, right? I mean, curious if he gets re-signed or extended. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but it'd be really interesting to see. So anyways, this is interesting though. And we talked about this also, Aether's question. I know you were frustrated about this as well, and we talked about it on the game, the pregame
Can I just
before.
talk about the guy that can't spell Justin Herbert's name properly?
That's Justin Herbert. That is Justin Herbert. That's his. Justin Herbert. That's it. Yeah. That's his hidden name.
That's his burner account. Okay.
Yeah,
yes, burner account.
Yeah.
Right.
He's listening to the Bolt Bros. He does look good. He does look good.
Weston Herbert. Yes.
Weston Herbert. Yeah, he just, hey, he can't say Justin Herbert and then have an Oregon Duck on there, and he can't do that. He can't do that. You got to be incognito mode.
Oh yeah, he's
still eating that brisket from last week and having some
victory brisket. Yep.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on this? And then we can move on to some of these other memes that we have here, and then we'll answer some more questions as well, too, guys.
Yeah. So I think this one goes to Richie. So I got a question. What are they thinking about giving Russ an extension before the start of the season? Are they crazy? Well,
yes.
They probably gave him a yes.
Yeah.
They probably gave him a lifetime membership to Sam's Club, probably too, because they're owned by the Waltons. And
that's right. Yeah.
10% discount at Walmart, lifetime, probably too. So yeah, they had to hook them up, right? So go ahead and answer.
No, yes, is the answer.
Yep.
And I have been, even Captain Jack, who I know you guys know well. I am on record on multiple podcasts, including on the MHRT network and everything, saying I did not think Russ was the right fit for us. I thought that we should have gone all in to try and get Aaron Rodgers because I felt that he could elevate some of the players on our team. And I felt personally that if we were to implement the Seattle or wide zone scheme, that's what Drew Lock flourished in when he was here in his rookie year when we had Rick Scangarello. So I would have much rather and much preferred keeping all those draft picks and actually just elevating the whole team with the first and second rounders that we gave up for Russ personally, and keep Drew Lock for the last 2 years there in his contract and ride that out. Own that right to the end and build out a better roster to potentially, and here's where the kicker would be there, is then you trade 2 or 3 first rounders once you've built out a roster with O-line and D-line and the right key pieces in the right spot if Drew Lock didn't work out.
Yeah. And
then you go and target that number 1 or number 2 pick with those draft picks to get a guy of Justin Herbert's caliber or someone like that.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's really hard too about when head coaches generally take over a team, especially the Broncos, and how they've had so much struggles with the quarterback position for years and years and years, basically since Manning. I'll say that. I think it was about him just trying to find his guy. And I mean, I kept hearing that Aaron Rodgers was trying to get there to the Broncos. Obviously that didn't work out. So it was like the next best guy. And it ended up being Russell Wilson and giving up the house for 2 years, basically. And then some. And so I think that's kind of really why it happened. And I think also with that negotiation, they probably are saying, hey, by the way, we'll sign you to a super fat contract. And
no, that was at the onset. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
For sure. 100%. Like all these Broncos fans and everyone else in the media is like, why did they do this? And my answer has always been, because it was negotiated before he waived his no trade clause. It's really, really simple.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with kind of, everything there, and that we shouldn't have kind of given up all those picks, in my opinion. I do think Aaron Rodgers was the guy. I also agree with your take on John Elway, just simply trying to swing and miss at a guy. And I also think Elway was onto an interesting trend because if you remember Brock Osweiler on the Broncos,
I remember
he was
him.
like 6'8" or 6'9" or something crazy. And there was a trend for that long stretch there when they brought him in where all these quarterbacks were just getting taller and taller and taller because all the linemen were getting taller and taller.
Yeah. Right.
And so there was a bit of a mental shift in the quarterback position. And he was a logical conclusion to kind of just the growth of these NFL players. They're just monstrous.
Yeah.
And obviously he failed miserably, but he was kind of Elway's guy that he thought would fill that void, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think, and just to speak specifically on this game, and I know I do want to be able to hear your thoughts of the entirety of the season for you guys, obviously, because we have the end of it, but I want to speak more on this game. Like, I know for the Chargers fans, I mean, we've had a lot of times where we go into last week of the season and we're like, well, what do we have to play for here? But there's always something you want to see from the team. So, like, what is it something that the Broncos fans are, and you specifically, what do you want to see from this team for the last game, week 18? What is the thing that you would like to be able to finally say, here it is? This is the Broncos.
I'd actually like to finally see the Broncos run the true wide zone scheme that we were all promised at the beginning of the season. I'd also like to see 12 personnel sets run with flanking tight ends, and I'd like to see it run properly.
Yep.
What I mean by both of those is the wide zone is what you're used to seeing from Broncos when, say, Elway was playing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where you see the entire offensive line shift all the way to the right or all the way to the left and kind of start moving the D line with them. And then you start opening out these wide gaps for running backs to run through. Typically they're between the guard and the tackle, or they're on the outside of the tackle between the tackle and the tight end.
Yep.
And what you can do with that style of play is that you can break off a tight end like you saw with Shannon Sharp when he was here. You can also break off a tight end like we have with Dulcich, although he's now on IR. But we have Eric Saubert, who I'm a huge fan of. Anyone who follows the Wild Wild West knows that that's my guy. Yep. And he can do his thing, and he will kill you. He is that good. And frankly, if the Broncos don't start using him, I could see him moving elsewhere, and I think he'll start actually putting up some pretty good numbers for another team. And we also have Albert O, who I'm not going to bother pronouncing his last name.
It's ridiculous.
Longest name out there.
Yeah, it's basically it's a Scrabble winner for those of you who don't know. And so Albert O is there, and I think that between the two of them, you could break either one of them off in terms of seam routes or even just shallow crossers just on the outside between the D line and the linebacking core, and that's a mismatch.
Oh, we lost James here. Okay, there we go. Oh, that was weird. Everyone dropped off.
Yeah, that was strange.
Can you guys see us?
There you go. Richie, can we hear you, brother?
Oh, I'm here. I'm just waiting for everything to kind of like return back. And
that was
interesting.
Keep
you dropped off first.
Apparently, this whole stream is just anti-Canada, and that's what I'm landing on right now.
Get out of here.
So we're like they must all be South Park fans, and we'll just leave it at that. There's a whole skit if you're not familiar.
Oh, I love South Park. It's the best. Yes.
Yeah.
Blame Canada.
Yeah, that's the
Canada.
One. Yeah, that's the one.
I love it. Hey, so why don't we go through some of these memes and then throw your questions out, guys, as well too. They can be directed to our Broncos fan here, Richie, or us. But go ahead and throw out some of those threads here, James. Those little memes, and we can kind of discuss them as we go, and then we'll kind of wrap up with some more questions and go from there, guys.
And once again, I know when Richie was going through some things, what he wants to see for this game, but I do want to just hear, hey, what's your whole season entirety of thoughts of the Broncos too?
Well, first off, I think it was just a huge disappointment. I think that the Broncos let's put it this way. Our defense for the first, was it 14 or 15 games, held our opponents to an average of something like 13 or 14 points.
Crazy, right?
Okay. Yeah. By all accounts, if you're able to do that on defense, you should be 14-0.
Yep.
And if you're not 14-0, something went horribly wrong one game because, half your roster should have died, right? Like there's no reason why you should be that bad at the record with having your defense playing that well. I mean, they were very close to a historic pace overall on a whole bunch of statistical categories.
Yeah, big time.
Up until that point. It was absolutely insane. And, I mean, as Broncos fans, we've been very spoiled when it comes to defensive stats and play and whatnot, with our 2015 defense, which was within within, if not the best in NFL all time, but it's certainly right up there, right?
Yep.
And
This guy, dude.
Hey, I had to throw one out there. Okay. Honk, honk.
So, how's the soundboard working?
Very good.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And also of note, guys, you will realize that Andrew is not wearing one of his shirts that he's traditionally worn on these podcasts.
Yeah, very flowery shirts. I love it.
He doesn't have the floral going. He doesn't have any of the funky swirl patterns that make him look like some kind of Cheshire cat on the screen. He went with normal hoodie. He went with normal hoodie. But I actually just think overall we didn't have an offensive identity, and that was our biggest problem this year.
Yeah. Agreed.
Is you either need to be a run team or a pass team. You can't kind of be whatever kind of sort of works, especially when you don't gel and have a unifying message underlying everything to the entire locker room. We clearly didn't have that, and that's why A, Hackett's no longer with us, and B, it's also why you saw just things just not work well, because you had us we had a quarterback who wanted to be less mobile, who was actually meant to be mobile, and that's the only way he could succeed at the NFL. He also needs to stand on phone books to see over people because he's so short, which also doesn't help his case either. So I think those sorts of things all play into it, and we simply need to own our identity going forward. Yeah. We need to have Wilson play in a wide zone style scheme. We need to be able to have him play off script, and we need to be a run-first football team, in large part because we play in Mile High. Yep. And Mile High can wear down opposing defenses because of the thinner air, and we practice in it. They don't.
Yep. Agreed. It is such an interesting thing about the Broncos this season, and you've made great points on that, and that's where I was going to head at, because your defense was doing a great job of just finding a way to hold this team down. I always said, hey, if you play the Broncos, you win one. If you get one touchdown and a field goal, you'll win, because they just can't find a way to score. And you guys, I think, if I'm correct, if you guys lose another one-score game this game, week 18, you will be a record for the most.
Record. Yeah.
Insane. So, I mean, the thing about it is, like, obviously, we're Chargers fans. You're a Broncos fan. Broncos, obviously, the way that I guess I'm getting to it is, you guys are this close. You truly were this close. And this is a game of inches, truly. And it was only a couple plays that you needed to do to be able to just get yourself over the hump. I mean, even to say Andrew and we were at the Broncos-Chargers Monday night game at SoFi.
Yep.
Overtime. One play basically in the overtime where we basically got you guys to fumble the punt, put us in field goal position, game over at that point. There was multiple points in the season where it was just like one play here and there. And that's just the NFL. It's crazy. The difference between a 5-12 season versus a 12-5 season, or 12-6, or whatever is. Basically, it's a huge difference. So,
Andrew, kind of on that point there, and I'm curious on your take on this as well. I've heard a general theme, right, which is there's kind of a mentality of winning that certain guys and teams have had over the years. Yeah. So you have guys like the Bills, for example, were a team that won really well in the regular season, but just never quite put everything together in the postseason for decades, kind of leading into kind of now Josh Allen is there, and I mean, they're just good all around. They just really are. Like, they're just good all around. But I actually think there is something to be said for that, which is the winning mentality, the mental mindset of being able to say, hey, time to pull up them socks, time to get on the field, tighten the laces on the cleats. We got this one, guys, and then go out and do it. Yep. When we had Von Miller, Peyton Manning, and some of the other key components from, say, our 2013, 2014, 2015 run, we had the right guys for that type of mentality. Aqib Talib as the cornerback on our team. We had TJ Ward, Peyton Manning. You had DeMarcus Ware. You had these Von Miller as well as another guy that I think is kind of unsung as a soft-spoken leader in the locker room, which says, like, just follow my lead, I got you. And by having those guys on the field, you have a winning mentality. Andrew, what are your thoughts on that general thought process? Because that, I think, plays a huge factor in, dare I even say, the Chargers of years past as well, where, that winning mentality in the locker room could have been a huge difference.
Yeah, I think for me, man, like when I think about, well, perfect example, Justin Herbert, we had 43 seconds left in that one game with the Titans. And Brandon Staley, that was to me the one game where I was like, okay, Brandon Staley, we would not have won if it wasn't for him, for our head coach, because he was doing a really good job of calling timeouts. They scored. They tied the game up. Then we had 43 seconds. He drove the ball down the field, kicked a field goal, won the game. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, right? And that's where Herbert is really good. See, and to me, that's, again, because I love Phil Rivers. Phil Rivers was amazing. But Phil would get – what's that?
Gee golly.
Yeah. Gummit. Gee golly. Yes.
Yeah. He was one of my favorite non-Broncos players. He was
amazing.
Hilarious.
Awesome. He was amazing.
Can we get him in a TV booth? Get him in the TV booth. He'll be phenomenal.
But
he's got kids to feed, man. You need to get him a good contract.
He's got like 12 kids to feed. Yeah, I know.
I know.
But the thing is, he couldn't emotionally keep himself in the game, and he'd make bad decisions. Right now, this is where Herbert's better. Is he's very cool, very calm, and very collected. Remember, when he got drafted, that was the big reason why a lot of people didn't want him. They said, oh, he's not a fiery leader. He's not one of those guys. Yep. But mentally, he keeps his head in the right spot and just does it.
Yep. So Rivers was like between here and here.
Yeah.
Herbert's here.
Yep.
So Rivers would have games and sections of games where he played better than Herbert has ever played.
Exactly. Yep.
But the problem with Rivers is that because his gap between kind of where the high and the low is so great.
Yep.
That you have this yo-yo effect between up and down, but where Herbert is kind of here, and then with Herbert, what you're hoping for is obviously as Chargers fans, not as me as Broncos fan, but what you're hoping for is that he just continues to elevate his floor so that it continues to move up closer to the ceiling, so that you end up with a very narrowed issue.
Yeah, and I think that's a big issue with Justin Herbert and also Phil Rivers for sure, right? So which meme were you trying to show there, James?
It was actually for some reason it didn't pop up, but it was the one where it talks about that. That gap you're talking about.
Oh, there we go. I can do it here, James.
Got it. Well, I was going to say not that one, but there's the other one with Justin Herbert. But basically the one where it talks about how there is a $40,000 bet on the Chargers, and that gap that you're talking about with Justin Herbert, that this guy threw $40,000 on the Chargers that's going to win the Super Bowl, because there's a lot of hype behind Justin Herbert as a coach, as a quarterback.
Yeah,
he's becoming a very, very elusive guy that a lot of people are noticing that, man, this guy's got a championship mentality. He's got the coolness. He's cool as a cucumber on the field. He can make the throws when necessary. Going back to even your question too on this, Rich, the championship mentality of this team, and I'm not saying, once again, we're Chargers fans here, guys, but we feel very much like we have leaders in our locker room. Say Kyle Van Noy. I'm sure Coach has talked a lot about him too. A guy that has been there, done that, won multiple Super Bowls. And he's stepped up as a leader for this team to really try to push us and elevate us more as a team. Like when we were 6-6,
right? A Patriots guy with a winning mentality. That's exactly what I'm saying, right?
That's what you need. You need that guy there, because, and I've reflected even back on, like, say, the mid-2000 Chargers team when we had Wade Phillips as our defensive coordinator, Martin Schottenheimer as our head coach. 14-2, home field advantage. What do? Lose the divisional round against the Patriots. We didn't have those guys that have been there, done that. We didn't have those guys to really tell you, guys, this might be your only chance to be able to get to the Super Bowl or get to wherever. That's the thing that I love about how Brandon Staley has built this team. He built this team to be able to be battle tested, or at least have leadership levels to be able to say, this is how you guys do it, by the way, guys. And I've done it. That's the one thing I love about how this team is built. And that's why I think there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm about this team, because we have those guys. I mean, Sebastian Joseph Day won a Super Bowl with the Rams last year.
KVN's won
two with the Patriots. I mean, JC Jackson, who's not on the team, I mean, who knows where that situation's going, but he was a guy that was on the team that won a Super Bowl. We had Sony Michel, who we let go on our as a running back. He was another Patriot guy, won a Super Bowl. Like, that's the thing, that he wanted to build these championship level based teams and players that could teach them how to do it. Like, I mean, even to give a nice shout out to Khalil Mack, basically putting together dinners for the teams and to be able to get this defense to where it's at. I know you chatted about how the Broncos had a huge streak of basically only allowing 13, 14 points scored onto the Broncos or whatnot. I mean, we're right now at a position in the last 4 games, we've only allowed under 11 points a game right now. And we're playing on such a weird level. Now, everybody could say, oh, well, you played the Colts. Well, you played the Titans. You played, Dolphins. Well, let's go ahead and look at that a little deeper. Yes, Colts the week before just dropped 36 on the Vikings. Titans, they had Henry, who was out there still doing his thing. We were getting ran all over. He didn't run all over us. We could look at the Dolphins. When we came in, we were 6-6. They had one top 3 offenses in the league. We held them under 220 something yards or whatnot. There's like all these things that you could start pointing out there that, like, these championship minded guys have really changed this team. And Kyle Van Noy, after or before the Raider game, had this whole big players only defensive discussion that really changed this team. I think it really clicked in the heads of all these players of how to do it now. Derwin James hasn't been there and done it.
No, but that's exactly it. And actually, to be interesting, the actually interesting thing is a guy like Derwin James needs to listen to a guy like Van Noy.
Agreed.
100%. Because he has all the talent in the world, but you need to be able to sharpen your mental mindset going into these games to approach them at a different level, to make sure that you don't allow your physical gifts to overshadow the extra push that you need to give yourself to be the guy in those games. And ultimately, I think that's what Derwin James's weakness has typically been since he's been with the Chargers. He's always been good, but he hasn't had that game in the latter part of the season or when it's really needed to make the big play. And he hasn't. It's a fact. And so I actually think that he has all the talent to do all the things, but he just needs Van Noy or even Jackson to hopefully,
be that guy,
chirp from the sidelines to say, no, guys, I don't think you understand. You need to kick it up to that next gear in order to continue to compete as the playoffs go on, because your body's going to say no, and you need to say, go to hell.
And I think at this part of the season, everyone's body is at that as well too. So let's go to some questions. We got about 10 minutes left. So Brian, I guess James, you want to take this one? What's your guys' input on Brandon Staley? You want to take this one real quick, and then we could go ahead. We have one here for you too as well, Rich, also from Aether.
What is your guys' input on Brandon Staley saying he's going to start all his starting players like last game, make decisions if he rests players? So we chatted about that earlier in the show. Personally, I get both sides of it. We need to know, we will know before this game starts if we have the 5 seed locked up. There's kind of nothing for us to play for at that time. But both Rich and I and Andrew, we've been chatting a little bit about that you need momentum to keep going. You don't want a player to kind of cool down, or team's momentum to be able to cool down going into the playoffs when it's most critical games for you. This is win or go home, basically, at this point, guys. I personally think that we still should have our players play minimum at least at a point to where, say, we're up 21 or 24 or something stupid like that. If we're able to do something like that, great. I don't expect that by any means. But at the same side, I want to keep momentum going. We do have a 4-game win streak right now. Our defense is playing lights out right now. Our offense finally had a good game last week. My thing, keep the players playing. Just be careful. Obviously, we don't see any detrimental injuries because we've been dealing with that all freaking season. But I in the end, I want to see this team go 11-6. And that's what matters to me, and keep momentum going. So I'm okay with them keep playing if they want to keep playing. So that's it. Andrew, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts are fairly the same, right? I mean, at least in there for the first half or whatnot, right? Get the wiggles out, make sure you're out there a little bit. If we do get a lead, right? Okay. let Chase get in there for a little bit, let some of these other guys have some catches, but you're right. You don't want to mess with the momentum, so that's kind of my thought. But again, you also don't want to go in there injured, right? You don't want some of the guys to be injured and hurt. So,
right.
And these guys right here are big parts of our team, right? Because they've stepped up and they've had to step up, guys, right? That's the interesting thing about it, right? Is again, with the spread offense that we run, the ball is whoever gets open, right? Whoever's open, that's who gets the ball. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, these guys, and once again, if we have a lot of garbage time out there or a lot of, say our second, third stringers or whatnot, these guys are playing still right here. If we got DeAndre Carter, if he gets 45 receptions, he's at 43. He gets a 100K bonus. 100K bonus if he gets the 550 yards, he's at 495. Everett, 250K bonus if he gets 60 receptions, he needs 5 receptions. That's a thing. Chuck Pagano, who was the head coach for the Colts, was on the Pat McAfee show talking about this. And he's like, I had some players that had bonuses like this going into the last game. What did I do? I just gave them bubble screens all day just so they could get to their point of amount of receptions bonus or whatever it might be. There are a lot of reasons out there to be able to have these guys out there too. So if Brandon Staley wants these guys to get paid, hey, this is a good game for them to be able to get paid.
Agreed.
And strategize.
This actually shows the quality of the organization, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Ultimately,
they care about it.
Is if you have players that are due bonuses like this, and if they get sat down, that has a negative impact on player personnel going forward, because other players will talk to other players and they will simply say, if you have a choice, say no. And I think that's an important thing to note. I don't see the Chargers as that type of an organization. So I actually think that they will play. To your guys' point, and going back to the previous comments we have, and then we'll jump into this thing here, the comment obviously for me to try to answer here, which is I think that as a football player, for those of you who don't know, I played highly competitive rugby up here in Canada. I was recruited nationally. I am literally all sorts of crazy when it comes to pain tolerance and other things. I believe in hitting people at full speed with no pads. And if I was ever put in a football uniform with that exoskeleton that you're legally allowed to wear, it would not end well for other people. And we'll just leave it at that. But I think it's important that you absorb those hits. So coming from a contact sport background like I have, in particular one where I didn't wear pads at all, it is super important to get your body adjusted to hitting and absorbing contact.
Yeah.
And it is, I truly cannot undersell or oversell, however you want to look at it, the importance of being able to teach your body the right way of absorbing those hits. And when you even go a week or two without it and you get hit the first go round after not getting hit like that, it's when you're sitting there saying, "Oi, I forgot how that felt." And you don't want your players to feel that in their first playoff game, because everything is faster in playoffs. As we were talking about earlier, guys, just before the question we brought up here, which was that winning mentality, that dialing it up, knowing how to turn it on and turn it off at the right moments. That's what the playoffs are all about. The last thing you want is your team to come into it looking flat.
Yeah, agreed. Big time. Big time. It makes total sense. I mean, even to say like Joey Bosa, him having his first game back, I think even with him having food poisoning or whatnot, I think he felt like I needed to get out there just to get my legs going. He take some hits, take some pushes around, try to be able to run after the quarterback. I think he still looked at it as like a full importance that he needed to be out there, because realize, I mean, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa off the edges is a nightmare to deal with. That's an absolute nightmare to deal with. And he knows that he can make impact when necessary. So that's something I'm for sure going to be watching as a Chargers fan. I'm going to watch to see how Joey Bosa plays this game and how many snaps he ends up getting. But he definitely needs to get out there and get pushed around.
Weston, I had two nicknames that were given to me by opposing teams, both nationally and locally. I am referred to as Northern Thunder and the Lunatic. So you can take both of those and apply them wherever you like. Good luck.
Thunder, Lunatic Thunder, one of the two.
Dude, I don't. I'm 6'2" and 245. Okay, like I'm a big dude.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yep. That's a middle linebacker size right
man,
there, dude.
and you got to be big to live up in Canada
Thumper.
too, bro. I'll tell you
Yeah.
what, you got to be. But yeah, let's look at Aether's question. By the way, we love Rich too. Rich is awesome. He's been so fun to work with on this. By the way, during the off season, we are probably going to be doing some videos with you as well too, Rich, if you want.
For sure.
Because we want to talk about the draft. We want to have these conversations.
Yeah.
So we want to keep doing that stuff. But
that's after the Super Bowl win by the Chargers, though, right?
Yeah.
That's after the Super Bowl win.
What are we going to need after we win the Super Bowl? Do we bring home the Lombardi? And then we get rid of our Lombardi that we got, our Joe Lombardi, right?
Yeah. Right. Oh boy.
Oh my gosh. So
we got a question down here, which is clearly probably meant to be thrown my way.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There was a lot of discussion made, and again, I highly I'm not trying to speak as someone who's come at the end of the season and saying this. You can go back and find my videos. A bunch of other Broncos fans were eye rolling. I frequent Raiders channels as well, who have me on to kind of discuss from the Broncos side of things. I am probably the most critical Broncos media guy that you're going to find out there of my own team. I will not sugarcoat anything, and I will absolutely slam anything and everything about my team if I think it's underperforming. I do not hold back. One, because I don't have media access and I don't really care. And two, because I want my team to do better. So I'd rather be honest about it.
Yeah.
So when I look at what we need to do in the offseason, as I said, this past offseason, we did not address our offensive line appropriately. And I think that when you have a quarterback like Russell Wilson, who frankly holds the ball too long and needs to have that smacked out of him a couple times, I think 4 seconds is ridiculous.
Way too long.
Like that's just like you're dumb if you're holding the ball for 4 seconds and expect not to get sacked.
Yeah.
And so the Broncos, if we're going to ever succeed, just in general, one, we're either going to have Russell Wilson or we're likely then going to have a rookie quarterback.
Yeah.
And in both scenarios, you're going to have a guy who's going to hold the ball probably longer than you would otherwise like. And in order to facilitate that, you need to bolster an offensive line to allow that protection to hold up so that both quarterbacks can do what they need to do in order to get the ball out and read the field properly. Ultimately, you'd hope that a rookie quarterback, unlike Wilson, because he is what he is at this point, is you basically would like a rookie quarterback, just like you guys have seen with Justin Herbert, who has progressed in how he's been able to read defenses, right?
Oh, yeah.
So he held on the ball way too long when he was a rookie, and he kind of got sacked or pushed out of the pocket, and he kind of missed on a bunch of plays a lot earlier on in his career. Not regularly, but he did. And as he's progressed and as he's gotten better, he's gotten much better at being able to reposition the offense to avoid those types of negative plays or poor plays. And that's what you want to see from a quarterback as they naturally progress. So an offensive line, a good one at least, will help you make those progressions. And I also think the Broncos need to identify and own an offensive identity. And what I mean by that is you're either a run team or a pass team. So you either want to run the ball more or you want to pass the ball more. A great example of a team that's had great success with owning an identity is the Tennessee Titans. They're a run-first team. Their offensive line is built to run first, and then they happen to have a few good pass catchers from time to time that roll through there and help bolster that offense. And the Broncos need to kind of figure out something similar.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All really good points. I mean, I was actually just thinking of also the Browns too. The Browns have basically just designed themselves as a very, very good running team too, with Chubb and Hunt, I believe it was, in the backfield. So they've built themselves to be a run-first team. Now, once again, Deshaun Watson, we'll see if that's a terrible signing, by the way, because I mean that hasn't worked out well for him either, at all. So, but hopefully he goes into the offseason, he gets back to where he was at. But I mean, there's a lot of mental capabilities I think that need to get worked on, in my opinion, with that, because he's been out for a while and he had a lot of off-field situations that he had to deal with. So, but I think we got a question here too from Brandon Mitchell. Do y'all believe the Chargers have any horrific matchups going to the playoffs? Because I don't. So we chatted about this. I mean, this AFC is intense. Like, we have some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in this conference. This conference is not easy. You got Allen, Mahomes, Burrow. Well, Tua was in there for a little while. Mac Jones is not, in my opinion, if the playoffs start now, Mac Jones is not much of an issue, in my opinion.
No.
And then you got who's really coming up with now is Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is another guy you start throwing in there.
He's got a coach now.
He's got a coach. He's got a guy that has been there, done that.
Yeah.
He's got a
back
ring.
to that leadership. You know,
Yep.
he's done it. He's won a Super Bowl. He did it even with his backup with Nick Foles. And so this is a very, very difficult conference. Now, any given Sunday, remember that, guys, things could change very quickly. You know, personally, in my opinion, with the Bills and the Bengals, there could be a little bit of a trauma situation out of them, in my opinion. We haven't even talked about the Damar Hamlin situation, guys. And I know I could bring up a little bit on that too. But the Damar Hamlin situation could really affect them too in their psyche. Because, I mean, obviously they saw that firsthand. The guy literally didn't have a pulse at all on the field.
Yep.
They had to resuscitate the guy. Man, shout out to all the health workers that were there at that moment in time to be able to go right out there and help this guy out immediately, because the average Joe out there wouldn't have had that much luck, to be honest.
Yeah, I heard a rumor that there was one of his teammates that started giving him CPR.
Yeah.
That's
right.
The wherewithal of the first responders and the teammate that started giving CPR to allow the ambulance, which also was there in unbelievable time, which was again, all things kind of lined up where he had the right things in the right place at the right time, which it's just wonderful to see that such a negative situation is now seemingly now on the uptick, which is great. But
amazing.
The first responders that were on scene performing the key medical procedures in order to keep that young man alive, given the circumstances, was remarkable. And as much as everyone likes to slam the NFL, that's the NFL's policy, is to have those guys ready and available on the sideline.
Yep.
Right.
And so I think it's important that we as fans, as fanalists and everything in between, that we look at that and say, credit where credit's due. The NFL has done the right thing and done right by the players to have the right folks on premise there to ensure that the players are well looked after if they do get hurt.
Yep, I agree.
100%.
I agree.
100%.
And it's just a wild situation to see that. But, you know, it's the player safety to that element, and to be able to have those guys and those first responders right then and there is amazing. And once again, injuries are going to be 100% here in the NFL, whoever you're playing. This was such a crazy freak accident to be able to see this happen. And it's wild. I mean, I did bring up this meme here, and this is a tweet from G.E. Thomas. Basically, he's a union. The NFL didn't postpone the Bengals-Bills game. The players did. Their union did. The ownership still wanted to play on. The NFL still wanted to play on. So Damar Hamlin deserves better, and his brothers, I knew it. So bottom line, it's amazing to be able to see what happened. There was a level of safety that the NFL seemed to not really care about, from what I'm hearing. The ownership still wanted to play too, which is a little scary, but the players stepped up and did something about it. And I think that's the one thing that, going back to that question, do we see teams in this conference in the playoffs as a threat? Sure, absolutely. But once again, I'm going to say, hey, how are the Bengals and the Bills going to recover from that? Because that's a very traumatic situation for them to see that, and it's going to make them hesitate possibly a little bit more as a team. So I do think confidence is very high on this team with the Chargers. I think we have a very, very good mojo going on right now. We have some championship pedigree on this team that are being leaders and stepping up. I personally feel me being a Chargers fan, hey, we're going to the Super Bowl. We're going to win it all. Yeah, everybody thinks that going into the playoffs. But bottom line, I think we got some good challengers there. I think for us, we're a young team going into the playoffs, so that experience to me matters. If you've been there, you know what it's like. Now we got leaders that are out there trying to be the leaders for us. I think we have a great opportunity and ahead of us. It's to be determined. But once again, I think that we are going toe to toe with a lot of the other guys in this team or in this conference, excuse me. And I think we could do very well against them. Chiefs, we've only lost by a total 6 points in 2 games, and we really put them on the ropes a couple times already this season.
Yep.
So I feel like I don't really feel losing 3 times to the Chiefs is almost seems mathematically impossible in my opinion. And I feel like we are playing better than the Chiefs in my opinion. Maybe it's a bold take on my side, but I think we're doing very well as a team. I think we could really go toe to toe with everybody in this conference. So we'll see. But, I know we're going short on time here, guys, but you guys want to elaborate a little bit more on player safety and everything too. Kind of what's your thoughts? I don't know, Richie or Andrew, if you had any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, go ahead, Rich. Yeah.
So which angle do we want to go in? So my angle on the DeMar Hamlin situation is that it was a standard tackle by all accounts when you looked at it happening on field.
100%.
And frankly, there's a number of other sports, by the way, that I think a lot of football fans are not factoring in, where this is actually not I'm not saying it's common, but it's certainly not unheard of. So I'm Canadian. Hi. This has actually happened multiple times in hockey.
Yep.
So for those that aren't familiar, this is actually not, for me, I've seen this before, but just not in the sport.
Yeah.
And so what happens in the hockey side of things is you see guys get checked dead on into the boards, and they end up with kind of their chest collapsing almost just at just the exact right time. And you'll see a 6'5", 240 ripped dude just literally stand up, stare, and dead stare, and just bam, right into the ice.
Yep.
And
potatoes.
I mean, like literally, it's exactly what you saw from Hamlin, and it's a wrong time, right moment, however you want to put it, where he was hit at right when his heart was trying to pump out blood, and it kind of almost caused a kind of like a heart palpitation of some sort, or a heart event, depending on how they want to word it. And it's happened multiple times in hockey. It just hasn't really happened yet in football. Yeah. So this is a first for the NFL. I appreciate the fact that it's unique. I also have a bit of an interesting take on player safety overall, and that is I do think that it was on the NFL to I do think it's important that the NFL call things evenly. And I also think it's important that the NFL start defining things a little bit better. Yeah. So where is the sliding scale on an injury standpoint where they call a game? Because at the end of the day, I think the owners and the NFL and other folks all have somewhat of a valid point here, which is none of these, like no one in any of these negotiations brought up any injury as being a bridge too far to continue playing the game.
Right.
Yep. Right. And look, I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be crass. I'm not trying to be any of those things. But at the end of the day, when it comes to negotiations in terms of labor negotiations and contract negotiations, this was obviously not brought up because this was ad hoc. Now, at the end of the day, the NFL did kind of the right thing, but I also think that the NFL should have had something in place as a catch-all to reschedule the game to make it fair for all parties involved.
Agreed.
And this is kind of showing that, I mean, dare I say, from a Roger Goodell perspective, a lack of leadership and forethought when it comes to probably foreseeable circumstances given the size and speed of the game that is currently going in. Yeah. Especially considering that you're taking out a lot of the blocks and things like that were injuring players, but then also assist in speeding up the game. So you're likely going to reduce some of the ticky-tack injuries that you were getting before, but then you're going to end up with guys hitting each other at faster speeds because you're eliminating kind of the speed bumps, if you will, that were traditionally in the middle of it. If that kind of makes sense to everyone kind of listening and watching at the moment. So I think that coming from a contact sport background, my great-grandfather was a leatherhead. I played competitive football. My dad played semi-pro football. Like, literally, I'm genetically predisposed to just want to hit people.
Yeah.
Right? So I have a different mental mindset when it comes to this sort of thing. I know what I sign up for when I sign up for contact sports.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
I
It's part of
sign
the
up
job
for it,
description.
and it's
Yep.
part of the job description.
Yep.
I have been kicked in the head more times than I can count. Okay.
Yep.
Explains a lot.
I look, it does. It really does. And
I had to say it.
no, it really does, right? And so I truly get it. But
Yeah.
I know what I'm signing up for.
Yep.
I'm getting onto a contact sport, into a field that is a contact sport. I'm going to get kicked in the head. I'm probably going to break a bone. I may or may not walk off the field when I'm done playing, but I agree to do those things anyways because I love the sport that I'm playing. And in the case of these professional football players, they are also getting heavily compensated in order to take that risk.
Yep.
I mean, even the base salary in the NFL is $250,000, which is more than
money.
what most people earn in
Yep.
multiple years in their careers.
Yep.
So these are the things that these players are being compensated for is the risk reward of the game that
Yep.
they're playing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just, in my opinion, I think that these need to be better defined. And I also think that the NFL could have done better in this particular situation as it pertains to rescheduling the game. No, but if I can quickly pivot to just player safety as a macro, as opposed to granularly looking at this particular thing,
Yep.
in my opinion, the NFL has done an absolute piss poor job this year from an NFL officiating perspective. And I actually go back to the Chiefs game where Russell Wilson was suplexed on the field by KC. Those of you who follow me on Twitter, I know both of you guys at least saw that as a retweet from me. And I mean, there is no excuse for a play like that to not be called. So if you're going to try and prioritize something like player safety, then you need to call it evenly throughout the entire league and across the league overall. And in my opinion, if you're going to create rules, and by the way, I disagree with most of them.
Yeah.
But if you're going to create rules to insert penalties for roughing the passer and other things that, then there needs to be a booth call from New York to say, guys, you missed one. You got to call it.
Yep.
Well, I actually think a lot of those calls should just come from New York anyways, right? I think it's like, what's the point of stopping the game? You could have people in the booth stop the game and then review it their own way and then make the call. And then the person down the field just says, they don't have to look. Why are they looking at anything? Right. Then they could say, okay, put the ball in the 20 and yada, yada. Right.
Yep.
That's what I would do. So
I agree.
Let me talk a little bit about this as well too. And I think bottom line, I think it's player safety is a huge discussion point. Unfortunately, you're right. It's a contact sport. It is what it is, right? That's part of what they're signing up for. I mean, to me, they're kind of like modern day gladiators, I guess. I guess you could probably argue UFC is more that way as well. But again, they know what they're signing up for. I have a buddy of mine who does some UFC fighting. He understands part of that is getting concussions. He got a concussion in his last fight a week ago. He called me up and he doesn't remember having a conversation with me after his fight. And I'm like, wow, dude, really? And that's what he's into. So it's an interesting conversation. It's interesting to hear. It's interesting to see. But unfortunately, wrong place, wrong time, wrong hit. It is what it is, man. And it's sad. It's sad to say.
Yeah. And the one thing it come to mind when Richie was talking about everything here and kind of what the NFL has been doing and what has not been doing and such too. And, first thing that comes to mind is this season. And this season in particular for kind of remember thinking like when Tua got his concussion. I feel like everything changed in the whole idea of what a concussion is in the NFL. Any sort of glimpse, this guy looks like he's got a concussion. He's out. Done. See you, dude. It's not like, hey, we're going to check on you, make sure you look good. Nope. It's almost like once you basically get a concussion, you are out pretty much. It's kind of the same idea with like Derwin James. Like he did kind of look a little stumbly and everything like that, but there was no like, hey, rub some dirt on it and get back out there. It's not. They are trying to find ways to protect their players a bit.
100%.
And I think they are doing a good job with that in some manner. Now, going back to even quarterback sacks, and Rich brought it up too, about how, like the roughing the passer call has really gotten kind of weird because, going back to that Kevin Hart skit where he talks about how you have to be super, super, not sack the quarterback very hard. You got to put a pillow under his head.
That was the
down.
greatest skit I've ever seen.
Fantastic. Right?
Like the greatest football skit. The only one that beats that is the Peyton Manning with the kids on the field.
Oh, yeah. Throwing the football at their head. Oh, best. Best. So good. So good. Yep. But, going back to the point, the NFL has been doing these things to really kind of make the league a little kind of questionable on certain things. Somebody wants to be a quarterback is still any other player on that field, whatever side. He should have the same kind of idea of being able to get hit the same way as a wide receiver with a middle linebacker. Same exact thing. It should be the same rules, but the quarterback is heavily protected. And that's kind of a little bit of a weird thing, but I get it and I understand that because quarterbacks kind of can make or break a team. They also are the guys that everybody wants to be able to see. I mean, it sucks when you're starting quarterbacks out and you just don't want to be a part of watching your team anymore. It changes
that's not the point, though.
No, it is not.
That's really not the point, right? It's totally cool that they want to protect the quarterback.
Yep.
If that's the goal of the NFL to say we want certain things to not happen to the quarterback because it might degrade the overall quality of the product on the field.
Yep.
I don't like it because I'm a contact sport guy and I say you sign up for contact sport, take the licks, sit down and shut up.
Yep.
Yeah,
right.
Part of the game.
It's part of the game, right?
Yep.
But if that's your prerogative, then okay, I will begrudgingly say fine. But my point though is that you can't then have a guy like Tom Brady who gets farted at and then gets called for roughing the passer.
Right.
And then a guy like Russell Wilson who was giving up the ball the way he was in that game where he kind of just tucked the ball under and held onto it. And they still weren't calling it. He said, well, I'm not going to take a sack like this. And then he chucked it. And then he was suplexed on the field in front of the refs. You can't have that disparity between A and B. It has to be evenly called regardless of who the quarterback is. If the quarterback is 5'3" and 140 pounds like Russell Wilson, or if a quarterback is 6'4" and 240 pounds like Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a dig at my own quarterback.
Yeah.
So it's irrelevant in my opinion. You have to make the calls and they have to be even and they have to be the same across the league.
Yeah.
And by the way, H4, that Chuck Cecil's neck roll, that the thing that Drew Tranquil's wearing around his neck, that's actually to protect his neck as well too. Yeah. So apparently it's some sort of thing. So if his head goes back, it'll support like the main parts of his neck. So a lot of linebackers are wearing it now. That's actually what's kind of replacing that sort of neck roll thing, which is kind of interesting. So, but you're right. I mean, it's an interesting conversation. We can talk about it a little bit more as well too. And I know chatting with you today, Rich, that was kind of one of the conversations we had, and I'm really glad you shared your opinion on it. But I know we're getting close to the end. So should we just give a couple last thoughts and then wrap up at this point?
Yeah, most definitely. Go ahead, Rich. Well, I mean, ultimately, I think that the Broncos are just too decimated to appropriately compete in this game. It's just, I really just don't, I don't see it happening. And the only chance that we really have at competing in this game overall, if I'm going to be blunt, is Latavius Murray, who is a monster of a man at the running back position. He is only modestly smaller than Derrick Henry, and it is not by much.
Yeah,
like we're talking a couple of pounds. He's the same height, give or take, but basically, so he's the guy that I think can actually make or break the game here, because the Chargers have had some ebbs and flows as it pertains to stopping the running game. And so if the Broncos do decide to treat this game as we would like to test and establish a running offensive identity, and if Murray can get going and our offensive linemen can kind of do those types of things, that's really our only hope, in my opinion, in this game to even compete. If we cannot run the ball and the Chargers have played as they have in the last 2-3 games that we've seen where they've been pretty good against the run overall, I really don't see the Broncos being able to compete, because you guys are a superior team at this point. And to be quite blunt, you have a much better team from a health perspective. And so long as you play some of your starters, generally speaking, Even if you played your second team guys, you're still going against the Broncos' fourth and fifth team guys. So you're still in a superior position from a competitive standpoint. I see the Broncos losing this one, although I don't think it's actually in the Chargers' best interest to win.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. Like maybe you're leaving a tense point there all of a sudden, Rich, on me. I want to see the Chargers go 11-6, and the reason why of it is I don't really care about the draft too much at this point. I would like to be able to find us a way to be able to go deep in the playoffs more than anything. Like
you should.
But at 10-6, I mean, what are you going to get? A 24th pick, 25th pick, even if you go out of the first round? Like, I'm okay with. I'm fine because I feel like we've done a good job with the offseason, putting in some really good players. We do have a good amount of players that we do need to sign next season that are off contract. Drew Tranquil being one of those. Kyle Van Noy, I think, needs to be another guy. Morgan Fox needs to be another guy that gets re-signed. I understand the draft is huge. Tom Telesco loves the draft. And he builds his teams based upon the draft. And to be honest, we've gotten really good about some of these late picks too, by the way. Like, we've been doing really good with these late picks. So, and the draft is great. Tom Telesco sees it as a huge part of his building of his team. But the one thing I'm just going to say is that I want to just keep winning. Honestly, I just want to keep winning. I want to see how far this team goes. If we get to the 32nd pick, I'm good with that.
That's the whole point, right?
That's fair.
Keep winning.
Yep. I'll take it. So the thing is, though, we just want to win. And that's one I want to see. I want to see our team just keep the momentum going. I want to be able to see us go to 11-6. It's a huge win for our coaching staff. It's a huge win for our players' momentum and confidence. Just keep winning on this one, guys. And I'm just excited about that all around. So, Andy, last thoughts?
Yeah, Les, I would just say, look, I think at the end of the day, we just want to have the momentum going into the postseason. I want to see people, do well. I'd love to see some of these records get broke, right? I know they talked a little about Herbert scoring a touchdown. I guess my thing is I just don't want to see him get injured, right? I want to see him healthy for the playoffs. And so that's more my concern. But at the end of the day, look, bottom line, it's great to see this team do well. I'm glad we're in the playoffs. I'm glad we're there. I'm glad we had Rich on. It's always great to have you on here.
Great to have you on.
It's always fun chatting with you and see your perspective, right? Because, bottom line, it is interesting. We have different perspectives on both teams. And so it's great to have you on here. But look, my prediction, I think it'll be a close one, but I think we'll pull it out. Or at least I think we'll win by 10. That's kind of my thought. What's your thoughts, James? And maybe Rich? We'll leave it
I thought you were going to say like when we're at SoFi, yeah, we're going to win by like 30. We're going to win by 30. You say that to the opposition fans. That's right then and there.
Oh, we're going to drop 4 touchdowns on you.
I think for the Broncos side of things, I think we'll probably win by 1 score. And that's going to be harsh for the Broncos to be able to have that record. So I don't know. I think that's kind of where it's at.
14-point game.
Yeah.
14 points.
Yeah, I think it'll be a little more of a blowout.
I think the
Chargers have a lot of momentum. But again, you also got to wonder how many, like if we lock the 5th seed, do we even put in a lot of players?
Yeah.
Staley's consistently said he wants to. So maybe they're in for the first half and then they sit the rest. Who knows, right? We'll see. We'll see where it goes, right? I would love to see some of these rookies get out there and get some play time, like Dean Leonard, like you're 100%. Talking about. JT Woods. I'd love to see JT Woods out there, right? These are guys we drafted that we need to get out there. So,
the other thing here for you guys here is entering into the playoffs. If you can get play time so let's say you're up by 21.
Yeah.
At some point in this game, even prior to halftime or something to that effect, which is it's completely plausible. I'm sorry to say it, Broncos fans, but it's legit and possible. So let's say you're up by 21 or even up by say 10 points going into half. At that point there, if I'm Staley, I'm saying, all right, Herbert, bench. Your key guys, you start throwing them to the bench because they've gotten the rigor of a game already put on their bodies for that little bit. There really is no point at that point, even if you end up losing that game, there is no point at that point to run the risk of injury. They've already played and they've already put their bodies through kind of just that stress of a game time situation, which is all you're really looking for you should be looking for at this point from a Chargers fan, given the fact you're locked into the playoffs.
Agreed.
When you look past that, then you're looking at saying, well, if we're in the playoffs and one of our main guys gets hurt, now we want the rookie or the second stringer or the guy that we're really curious to see because we saw him one game look halfway decent.
Yeah.
That's who you want in that second half of that game, because if you're in a position in the playoffs, you want guys like that to get the play time against in a game that at that point doesn't matter for you.
Yep.
100%.
And get game time experience against a team who really ought to, from the Denver Broncos perspective, be playing for a roster spot and maybe not even on our team. So you're going to have guys who should or ought to be playing at full tilt at, turn it up to 11, stealing the whole Spinal Tap reference, to say at minimum, I want to be able to make a roster next season. So I want tape of me out there to show that I can actually do this thing.
Yep.
So I think that that's where you guys would want to be from a Chargers perspective, even if for whatever reason the Broncos are able to pull this one off, which I think is highly unlikely.
Yep.
I think ultimately you guys should be starting pulling your starters, win or lose, at halftime, because they've already got the rigor of the game. And at that point, there's no win for you. Why would you bother?
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah.
Yep.
And good with that. For next season too. Touches for next season.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'll tell you a brief story and then we'll wrap. But I played some volleyball and I was teaching a friend of mine how to play, and we kept feeding her the ball and she just kept messing up. But it's interesting. The more touches she got, the better she got, right? She understands gameplay, understands how to position her body. And that's what these players have to do as well, right? It's the more you practice, the more you touch, the more you see, the more you understand the situation, where to put the ball, how much to put on the ball, yada, yada. It's the same thing with any player. It's human beings. That's exactly how it is. That's why we practice. That's why we do what we do. But again, Rich, as always, it's always so fun to have you on, man. Really appreciate your perspective. And, James, you going to hit the button or am I going to hit it, buddy?
I'll do it.
Because we did this one time, like he hit it, then I hit it, then he hit it, then I hit it. And it was like going in, going out. It was hilarious. I was like, oh no, what's going on here? It was so funny. All right. You hit it. My hands.
All right, guys. We out. Let's go. We done. See you, boys.
See you guys.
Late.